Hi there, I am Koen Verstrepen and I am one of the founders of Froomle. And I would like to welcome you very much in our next episode of Value from AI. And in this episode we will answer some questions that have to do with AI in practice. A lot of times we get questions about, well, all this AI stuff is very nice, but it's easier said than done. And that's why I have invited somebody who has realized successful AI implementations in real life. And that is Maarten. Maarten, thank you for joining us. Tell us what you do.
Well, yes, I'm currently working at Medialaan-Persgroep, where I'm the product owner of the team that's responsible for providing all the personalization services for our video products.
All right, cool. Personalization, it's a word that is used in many contexts. According to you, what is personalization?
For me, personalization is really about bringing a unique and personalized experience to every user of a product, so that each experience is tailored to that user's needs without them even realizing that it is tailored to them.
Okay. Personalization is often also understood to be segmentation, where you define, let's say, 10 segments and every person gets the tailored segment. Is that also how you understand it?
Not really. That's not really personalization, but it can be a part of it. It can be maybe a roadmap towards it. It depends on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
For us, for example, we use segmentation in a lot of things, like if we see patterns in analytics and want to quickly A/B test something, then we will use segments, for example. So that's really if you want to optimize something for still quite a broad audience, not really tailored to the individual person. So it's a good in between, I would say.
Okay. And how does the segmentation compare to personalization on the individual level? Is it as present or less present or more present?
I think it's easier to do, especially from an engineering point of view, and also for talking with marketing and business stakeholders. They better understand what's happening, and it still means that you get a platform that is better catered towards some of the individual users because you get them in the correct segments. So I would say it's really a light version of personalization.
Okay,
maybe.
okay. So you are now, I think we can say, successful making progress with personalization, but a lot of people still have to start. And they ask themselves, well, how should we start? How should we take the first step? So my question to you is, how did you do it? What was the first step that you took?
When I joined at Medialaan, I was joining as a data scientist. Personalization wasn't one of my key objectives or anything. It's something that I had already some prior experience with. And there were still people like innovation teams talking about this, but they were having difficulty getting traction with the business, with marketing teams to really formalize it, to get a concrete project, to really make it happen. Mm-hmm. So the first step really was about explaining the concepts, the way personalization, really bringing the concepts to the marketing stakeholders, the business stakeholders, to let them understand the potential, and then look for an easy way in, a way where we can test the value for our products without compromising the entire product proposition, for example.
Okay.
So
cool.
That was really the baby step, I would say.
All right. And then from this first baby step, what did you need to do or need to prove to be able to take the next step?
Yeah. So first we identify a case. Okay, where would it make sense for us to add personalization? At which parts of our websites, our apps, do we have a lot of content that is currently maybe being controlled by editors, or it's not being controlled, or it's modified with simple business rules, and where we see an opportunity to really bring a better experience. And for us, that was we looked at all our products, and then we looked at the places where we think we saw potential. We identified a few cases. Then the next step was, how can we make this happen? What do we lack? Of course, on a technical level, you need a lot of stuff. Our backend systems were not at all provisioned for these type of applications. So that's when we started looking around for small providers. Also, how we met Froomle the first time, because we were looking for people who could help us in a very clear case to do all the personalization. Mm-hmm. We have some data, we have some users, we have some videos. Mix and match these for us.
All right, cool. So today you have started, you have made progress. What does the future bring?
Yeah, we've come a long way since. It's been over 2 years that we've been exploring this and growing the project. Now, I believe personalization is seen as a key aspect of any product we do. Any new product we're launching, it goes without saying, personalization is a key concept. For our team, one of the big priorities for next year will also be bringing that to outside of the product, into the CRM, for example, to make sure that our direct communication, the mails, the notifications are also personalized and contextualized for the user, for their device. So that's one of the big things that we really want to address, where we are currently only doing small experiments. So 2 years ago we were doing the small experiments on our site, now we're doing them in the CRM. And next year we want to be not only fully productionized in the apps and sites, but also in the direct communication.
Okay. So do I understand correctly that in the beginning you needed to focus a lot on bringing all business stakeholders together and convincing them that it was the right thing to do, and that you are now at the point that everybody in the business is convinced that personalization is key? Or is that not really true?
We've progressed for sure, but I would say that the convincing and the evangelizing of the entire concept, educating on the possibilities, is still a very big part of my job. Actually, it's still an ongoing item for me, and I think it's normal because, of course, you're at the intersection of the technology, the data, and the product. So it's really a field in its own, and so that's why you constantly need to make sure everybody's aware of where we can go and make sure everybody's on board to get there.
Okay.
So it remains a big part of my job.
Okay. So how do non-technical people, let's say product owners, marketeers, etc., how do they look at personalization? What is their angle?
I'd say at the beginning there was a lot of skepticism, especially if you're not into the technology. The last few years we've seen a lot of hype in the marketing as well, and that helps for acceptance, but at first there really was an issue with acceptance. Now we have acceptance, but we really need to make sure they understand the possibilities and to make sure we build a relationship of trust, actually, because it takes some convincing, but it's mostly about trust, right? Because it's a black box, whether it's a service provider or a data scientist in your team, someone is doing what is often referred to as magic. Mm-hmm. So you need to step by step convince them that the magic can be trusted in certain cases and that it adds value.
Okay. How does your business perceive the value of personalization? Is it, are there very strict KPIs, or is it more a subjective way of evaluating it?
It's a complex question. When we started out, it was very explorative. We were just exploring options. And when you talk KPIs, the only thing we were really looking at is conversion. We're modifying a single element of the app. Is it being used more? Yes, it is, and that was the way forward. Now, how is the business looking at this today? Because of the move in all of business, in all of marketing with machine learning and personalization, they're considering it as a key component of the product. No further questions asked. In that regard, everyone is agreeing that for media products, for digital products, personalization is a key feature. It's considered a product feature now. So that's a key aspect of it. But of course, you need to justify it beyond that. So there are KPIs. For us, we are still mainly advertising based, user consume video. So that's what we want to push, right? We want to make sure that everybody finds their content as frictionless as possible and that they are aware of all the content that is on offer. Mm-hmm. So there we really monitor, can we see them consume more videos? Can we diversify their taste maybe?
Okay. Your job title is Personalization Platform Manager.
Yeah.
Something we did not talk about yet is the platform aspect. Yeah. What is that about?
Yeah, I'm a product owner of a team that builds these services actually, and how it works is we are operating in a microservice architecture. So the personalization platform is a combination of services, all providing services for personalizing video for users. So be it for a specific UI element, we provide a specific API or a general API that can rank videos given a user or a context. Mm-hmm. These are all services that our platform provides.
Okay, and you are the product owner of that platform. Yeah. Okay, so I suppose there is a team working on this platform.
Yes.
More or less, how many people are in that team?
Our team is currently about 8 people, but I do have to admit that we have a lot of what is called backpacks and other responsibilities as well, because we are the ones most experienced with the behavioral data that is captured in our platforms. Mm-hmm. So we also oversee like the ETLs that happen to get them into KPI dashboards, into reporting for management and C-level management even. We also are responsible for a lot of the user aggregation, the content aggregation. It's also things we do. A lot of these are also key components and sources for a personalization platform, so it makes sense. But so for these 8 people, the scope is a bit broader than only the personalization platform. We are also doing some of the building stones around it.
Okay. So these, let's say more or less 8 people, are they all data scientists, or do you also have other roles in your team?
We have a few roles. We have 4 data engineers. Data engineers, scientists, depends a bit how you define them.
Yes.
I keep finding that tricky definitions. But we have, I'd say, 2 people with a lot of experience more towards the science, who really have a good grasp of machine learning and the possibilities. And then we have 2 guys who have more operational experience, do big data transformation, that kind of stuff, who used to do things like MapReduce, for example, as well, who have a background in that side. That's about 4 people who do the engineering and the science. Mm-hmm. We have 1 guy who specializes in all DevOps, CI, CD stuff, the cloud, because we're bringing everything towards the cloud at this moment. And then we have people who are more specialized in analytics and data quality as well, because as I mentioned, we oversee the entire data flow, and one of the cliches in data is you need quality. So we have dedicated people to make sure that there is that the quality is acceptable in the entire data flow.
Yeah, I heard about big companies doing a lot with machine learning and AI, and somebody was at some point even talking about 30 people doing nothing else than working on data quality, making sure the quality of the data is good. So I think it's indeed very important. Does that mean that because your team provides a service that is live 24/7, so is that also your job, or do you have in the company other teams providing that, let's say, day and night support?
No, at Medialaan-Persgroep, every technology team is responsible for maintaining their own service, the you build it, you run it mantra. So we are very much in charge of making sure that our service is available 24/7. Of course, we have a lot of fallback provisions on our side, and we have clear API contracts and SLAs with all the people who use our service. So the front end knows what guarantees we give, and they add on top what they need. So they also have a responsibility, and if it, for example, breaks, it's always the front end team who is the first to get contacted. But yes, we are very much responsible for the availability of our infrastructure, which I consider to be an advantage, by the way. It adds complexity and responsibility, but it really empowers the team.
Okay, and how does it empower the team?
You have less dependency on external teams, right? Because yes, you are responsible for keeping it operational, but it also means that you have to have the expertise in your team. So it's at first a hurdle. You have to get a team together that is balanced to carry its responsibility. But it also means that you're self-sufficient in most of your needs.
Yeah. How did you find your team?
It's hard. I think anyone who's in the field knows it's really hard. So if I would have a secret, I don't think I'd share it here. But it's an ongoing concern, and we try to put non-stop effort on recruiting now, because it's so hard to find the right people that we just never stop recruiting, actually.
Yeah.
I think most people.
Sounds familiar. Today, what is your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is really on the operational level. As I just explained about the microarchitecture and the service we're building, now we're building everything in a cloud environment, we're building everything on the Amazon stack. And so we had to build this team. Some of these guys joined us as recently as September, so in a few months' time we had to build up a lot of expertise, a lot of new technologies. So it was heavy engineering efforts, but I think we're over the hump there, and we're now onto an easier path. But that was the biggest challenge for the past few months, actually, really getting that end-to-end responsibility of your component. Okay,
and has that always been the biggest challenge, or do the biggest challenges change over time?
Well, it changes a lot. As I mentioned, at first the challenge was really getting some feeling with business stakeholders and just getting some form of interest going, some awareness of the topics. Once that is going, you get on a proof of concept, you try to make that work, and it just keeps building from there. You have to make sure the proof of concept goes right. You have to set clear KPIs so you can agree with your stakeholders that it was or was not a success. Once you build your success from there, you really need to have a clear idea of how to build the next component, and that's all the engineering effort we've been having for the last few months actually. So it changes a lot.
Okay. In the broader topic of AI, much less focused on your job, but what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about data and AI?
I think the misconception is, now that you have all the buzz in the marketing fields, some people just think it is a de facto solution to something, and I don't think data is ever a de facto solution. It can be an essential part of a solution, but it's never the de facto solution.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you see companies pushing big investments or making big claims based on data, and there's no underlying foundations yet. So that's, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions, that just throwing a few data scientists and a data stream at the problem will solve it.
No, because for one, you also need the operational part.
Yeah.
Then if we talk about the future of AI, there are many diverging visions. You have the doomsayers, they say AI, in 10 years the robots will take over. Then you have other people saying, oh well, don't worry, the robots will stay stupid for a very long time. Where do you stand in this debate?
In everything I do, I am a very pragmatic person, so I try not to get too much involved into the whole singularity topics, stuff like that. What I am fascinated by is the thing we see right now in industry. For example, you have companies who are like offering machine learning as a service, some companies who offer very specific machine learning powered products already. Then you have still very heavy engineering into like the PyTorch stuff, which is carried by companies like Facebook and Google. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And I do think that we will see a big maturization of the entire field, but I'm really curious to see where that goes, because, for example, it will have impact on all the startups. Some of it will facilitate, like, for example, what Google is now doing with Google Vision, all the image recognition, the video recognition, the language stuff. That's really powerful stuff, and that's really taking out all of the complexity of the neural nets, and they just offer a ready-to-use product. So I think that's a very big step forward for AI and machine learning that's already happening now. So I'm curious to see how far that can go, because personally I'm not convinced that you can do machine learning as a service, as a black box. Depending on the application, you really need business knowledge and a guy who can be between the machine learning and the application. So I'm really excited to see where that is going, the whole machine learning as a service. As far as the AI doomsday scenarios, I'm not too concerned currently. I am concerned about, and that's I think what frightens most people, is the incredible acceleration we've seen with everything with the deep learning, right? We're on some crazy curve right now, but I think it will plateau eventually, and I think it will plateau before we reach singularity or anything like that. I hope it plateaus after we have self-driving cars and amazing robots, but I think it will plateau way before the singularity. So I'm not too concerned.
Yeah, self-driving car would be nice and comfortable. I think it was very interesting what you said about machine learning AI as a service, where you don't need somebody technical anymore. It's plug and play. It works totally by itself. You're definitely not a believer, I see. Because is it correct? Do you think that it is always important that on the application side that there are technical people marrying, let's say, the service and the product?
Yeah, it depends how specific the service is, right? If you do personalization, I do believe you can have that as a service, but then you need to know what you're personalizing. That's a clear domain. You can have e-commerce, videos. You have a very clear domain. There, I believe you can have some abstraction and you have some acceleration, some synergy, just because it's a very clear-cut domain. Same with what Google is doing in the images. It's a very clear-cut domain. But like a lot of the startups currently are in their niche domains, or they're trying to do something in health, for example. And there, I don't think there's a machine learning solution out of the box that will solve these problems. You really need deep domain knowledge of the problem you're trying to solve. You cannot just throw a neural net at it and see what happens.
Okay. If people they have data, everybody has data these days, and they want to take value from it. They want to maximize the value they get from it. What would your advice to them be?
That's also one of those tricky things, right? Everyone has data and it is the new oil. It can be, but it's tricky. I'd say my advice try to be pragmatic as well. That's a very personal stake in that, but I don't believe in like big silver bullet approaches and solutions. Then you're investing a lot in a lot of infrastructure and a lot of teams maybe, and you're not really sure where you're going. That only works if you're doing research and you can afford to do research if you're Facebook or Google. If you're not a Silicon Valley company with infinite amounts of money, I would really be pragmatic in everything you do.
Yeah.
Maybe you can find a strategic point for your company where it makes sense. A lot of in the retail stuff like that, you can see a clear path towards where it makes sense to start really valorizing your data. But then again, a lot of retailers have been doing this before it was cool, right? In the 80s, I think Colgate has been collecting customer data for as long as they've existed almost. So that's not a new thing. Okay. So I think it really depends on the industry.
All right. Then a dilemma. What do you prefer? Fail fast or never fail?
Definitely fail fast.
Yeah. Why? Why is that?
You want to quickly know if it's going to work or not and just move on to the next thing. Not wait and see for a very long time. And
is that that fast failing, making really quick iterations, is that a part of something that would determine the success of your team?
I think so, I believe so. Currently we're almost doing like extreme programming, so we're very quick in the iterations, but I do believe it's important. Whether it's like on the enterprise level or in the technology, everything is moving at an incredible pace. What you want to achieve with your service might change in a few months' time. The technology you build it on can change in a few months' time. Don't plan ahead for the next 40 months. Everything will be different. So better try something fast and then adjust your scope as necessary. Yeah.
So you have the cycle from ID to test and really evaluating the test. How long would you say, more or less, because it depends on the project obviously, how long would you say that it takes today and how short do you want it to be?
I think actually also in our responsibilities outside of personalization, we've made great improvements on that over the past year actually. We've really tried to make smart decisions when engineering, and for me when a business stakeholder comes with a regular ID, no moonshot ID, we're always talking weeks from ID to realization, maybe a few months, but not long-term roadmap planning unless it's like a crazy ID. And for like small adjustments in a recommendation algorithm, we're talking sprints. A sprint is 2 weeks for us, like 1-2 sprints. We're not talking longer term. New feature for CRM as well. It should be a few sprints. Okay. So you really need to be able to go there fast, see if it works and adjust as necessary. Also, when they come with a big ID, we will decompose it and find easy value, the low-hanging fruit, and then after that maybe it's already sufficient or maybe we need to shift anyway. So it's important that we can adjust our scope every few weeks on an ID.
All right. In the challenge of valorizing data and doing cool stuff with data, there are some companies in the world who you could consider to be the top performers. Is there one of those companies that you say, well, for me, that's an example of how you should do it?
Yeah, I don't think there's one great example currently there. I think there's a lot of companies putting good effort in there.
Let's say, for example, a Spotify or a Netflix, they are often quoted. Do you think that's rightfully so, or is that maybe overrated?
Well, I think what I always tell my business stakeholders is you can never judge personalization based on your own experience, because you never know which KPIs matter to the company. Mm-hmm. If you're asking me which personalization service I'm really happy with, for me, I'm a big supporter of Spotify's Discover Weekly. Ever since it launched, I've been really impressed with it. And whenever I see some weird quirks in the service, I can usually even estimate what causes them. Okay. So that's really fascinating. Like, for example, I get sometimes some weird alternative German rock music, but I see why I get it, because it's in the genre and they clearly don't account for like the European region thing where, yeah, I'm not into German music. But so that's a service that I'm really happy with, and I think Spotify as a company is really focusing on making it your product. So I think they are really one of the leaders for me in personalized experiences. Okay. So that's clearly a good way to do it in the personalization area.
Yes. And then final question, AI, personalization, machine learning, it's all kind of overhyped right now. What are your tricks to filter the bullshit from the real value?
Yeah. Well, I try to read a lot online, and what I tend to stick to is the people who are still somewhat linked to academia, for example. Like Facebook and Google have invested big in teams that they picked out of academia. These guys I keep following. Companies that tend to not publish anything of their work or not share it, they're not attending any conferences or meetups, I get a bit more skeptical easily. That's what I use as a personal compass to filter all the info, because there's a lot of good stuff out there, so you really need to filter. Not even all the good stuff, you cannot read it, it's too much. So that's usually what I use, like if there's a link to some kind of academia, it's usually a good thing.
All right, cool. Maarten, thanks a lot for
My
joining
pleasure.
our show. I think it was very interesting, and I hope the viewers also had a good time.
I hope so as well.
If you want to learn more about AI and how to apply it to increase, for example, conversion, keep an eye on our YouTube channel, and I hope to see you back in our next episode of Value for AI.